Okay. Hello, everybody. I am John Bard from Children's Book Insider, and you'll be meeting Laura Bard, Bacchus Bard, my wife and business partner of 30 years, in just a minute. And we'll be introducing you tonight to a really interesting and fascinating person, Patrice Williams-Marks. A couple of thoughts before we get started. We have disabled the chat box. We intended to do that anyway. Unfortunately, someone already, just while we were chatting beforehand, came in and wrote something very hateful, and this is part of the reasons why we're here tonight. This is what is happening in the world. So I deeply apologize for anyone who saw that. I certainly apologize to Patrice for that. If there was a way we can delete it, we would. Unfortunately, right now, it doesn't look like we can. So we're just going to leave the chat box alone tonight. What we said last week is that we have no great statements to make. We are here to listen. We're here to learn. We're here to understand what's happening right now in the world. And through the Distancing Social, periodically we're going to revisit this, and we're going to look at this from lots of different angles. There's not something we can fix or cover in one night. Patrice is here to talk about her experience. She doesn't represent a group. She's not here to make statements on behalf of anybody. What you're going to be hearing from is an experienced author, a really smart person, and somebody who not only is a sensitivity reader, but trains sensitivity readers. So we're going to really be limiting the conversation to that scope. And I said, in the months ahead, we'll be revisiting this from lots of different angles, all to help empower you and to help empower all of us to participate in this discussion in a constructive way. So with that, now I am going to, oh, actually, let me tell you this real quick. For those of you who are new and you want to find out about the Distancing Social every week, go ahead and go to writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet. Sign up for that. You get that. That's our free gift. It's a really great resource. And then you'll be on our list, and we'll be able to tell you every week, not just what the topic is, but also when the replay is available. So go ahead and do that, or just make a note of that. And now, here's Laura. And we're going to have to figure out how to do this without the chat.
Oh my goodness. Well, you can use the Q&A. Okay. So every week, if you're new to us, we play this fun little game here where I am somewhere in the world, some literary landmark, and you need to guess where I am. So this lovely garden here.
Stop sharing.
Oh, stop sharing. That's true. So you can see it. So this is this lovely garden, and there's a sign on the gate, on the fence there, that said the name of the garden, which I have blocked out so you can't cheat. But I am going to look in the Q&A, and I want you to give me your best guesses of where I might be. Again, this is so Robin says this.
Is that the correct answer?
No.
Oh, okay.
Robin says The Secret Garden, which is not quite right.
Oh my God.
Okay, well,
I know.
no one can see. So anybody, but obviously garden is part of the name. Alice, no, this is actually, this particular garden is named after an author. Her name is in the name of the garden. And I'll give you a couple clues if you need a few more. Again, get Beatrix Potter. No, good guess though, Tamara. No, this is in the United States. Beverly Cleary, nope. We're kind of getting into the same, well, kind of the same age though. So this is somewhere in New York. And this author is mainly known for picture books. I'll give you a couple more minutes and see if you can guess. I'll give you the name, well, I'll give you a couple more, another minute, and if you don't have any more guesses, I'll give you the name of one of her books.
Where in New York is it? Can you tell them that?
It's in Monticello, New York. It's part of a library there. But this garden was made in the name of this author, and it is designated as a literary landmark now. And it's quite lovely. I mean, wouldn't you love to go to a story time right here in this garden? And the chair is significant. The chair is based on a chair in one of the author's books. That's a clue. Vera Williams, yes, Lauren. Lauren Scott got it. Yay. Okay, so what are you doing?
Sharing your screen.
Oh, thank you. Like John's got the controls.
I'm producing.
So, Vera B. Williams this is the Vera's Story Garden at the Ethelbert B. Crawford Library in Monticello, New York. And it was named a literary landmark in honor of children's author and illustrator Vera Williams, whose parents were Russian and Polish immigrants and whose work often featured diverse characters in urban settings. So she was awarded the Caldecott and Boston Globe Hornbook Award for A Chair for My Mother in 1983. And the chair in the library was inspired by that book. And in 2004, she was a US nominee for the Hans Christian Andersen Award, the highest recognition for children's book authors. And she died in 2015 at the age of 88, leaving a rich literary legacy. So if you're ever near Monticello, go visit Vera's Garden. That's Vera's Story Garden, actually, is what that sign says on the fence. So isn't that awesome? Okay, so let's move on. I'm just going to change me back to CBI here. Hopefully, oh, I think I'm under the wrong one. Okay. Hopefully that's not backward. Anyway, okay, you can't tell me because I have the checkbox disabled. Okay, so now it's time for us to celebrate. We do this every week and I'm so excited. We get to celebrate the successes of our customers, our viewers, all of you. So Natasha Wing published her newest picture book the night before Election Day on June 9th. And it's the latest title in her Night Before series with Grosset and Dunlap. This is a very timely book, very important this year, and it includes stickers. So yay, good for you, Natasha. And I'm sure lots of people are wanting to type yay, Natasha in the chat box. Sorry, we've got to close. Joanne Bausman, writing under the name J.S. Lefferson, self-published her first picture book, The Terrible Truth of the Finicky Frog, on Amazon. Awesome. Good for you, Joanne. And Jane McBride Choate, who is a frequent contributor to our Children's Book Insider newsletter. A lot of you probably know her name. She had her 38th novel, Stolen Child, make it to the top 25 books on Publishers Weekly's bestseller list last week. So isn't that awesome? And Stolen Child it's actually an adult romance, and it's part of the love-inspired suspense series from Harlequin Romance. So good for you, Jane. We love to celebrate your successes. Everyone's successes. It's awesome. So we want to hear your good news. So anything you want to celebrate, doesn't have to be a publication. It can be any little step you've taken on your journey to becoming a published author. We want to hear about it. And you can mail us at writeforkids.org and put celebrate in the subject line. And we will feature you on a future distancing social. Also, if you need to contact us for any reason, for information, you forgot your password to get into your newsletter, anything like that, please use that email, and you can contact us that way. I'm just asking, please don't message us on Facebook. It's just it's easier for me to keep track of what you all need from us if you use the email. So now we're going to take a poll. We do this every week as well. So let me pull down the poll. And today's poll, come on, Zoom. It's going to show it for me in a second. It's getting it's a little slow. There we go. Who's a good dog? That's the question of the week. And you get to vote. Is it Clifford the Big Red Dog, Harry the Dirty Dog, Gloria from Officer Buckle and Gloria, one of my favorite picture books, the Pokey Little Puppy, Walter the Farting Dog, Winn-Dixie from Because of Winn-Dixie by Kate DiCamillo, another amazing book. Or Carl from Good Dog Carl, and all the Carl books. Some of these are kind of throwbacks. You got to be old like me to remember them. So, oh, I see someone's pulling in the lead here. You can't see the results until I post them, but there's a lot of good dogs on this list, I think. Okay, I'm going to give you 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. The polls are closed. Let me post the results. Actually was not as much of a runaway. I mean, there was one runaway winner, but not as much as I would have expected. So there we go. Clifford won, the big red dog, 42% of the vote. Walter came in last. I think it's because of his name. He's actually a good dog. So, all right. That was a fun one. So we want to tell you real quick about something we are doing next week. We are holding a webinar called The Children's Nonfiction Market, How to Break In and How to Succeed, with Lionel Bender, who is the author of over 70 Kidlit nonfiction books, and he also runs a book packaging company where he produces nonfiction books for a lot of very prominent publishers. And he is going to give you a wonderful overview of the nonfiction market, the kinds of nonfiction you can write for children, how to figure out who's publishing what, and some tips for how to submit to publishers, and also a little bit about deciding if you should self-publish, go submit to the educational market. There's a lot of options for you in nonfiction these days, and it can be very, very creative and fun. So if you're interested, that webinar, it is a paid webinar. It will be $47. It's going to be at least 90 minutes long. I mean, there's a lot of content here. Plus, there will be a good hefty Q&A session at the end. writeforkids.org/nonfiction-success. You can go to that link and sign up. And if you can't attend live, it's okay, because you will get access, lifetime access to the replay. So if you're at all interested in writing nonfiction, that is one that you should definitely check out. Okay, so a few links of interest that I collect every week about what's going on in publishing. So I know we have a lot of people who are self-publishers who are part of our customer list. So I wanted to alert you to the fact that Book Life, which is the Publishers Weekly website and monthly supplement dedicated to self-publishing, is sponsoring the 2020 Book Life Prize Fiction Contest for self-published books. And entries must be in by August 31st. And they have sort of 3 rounds of vetting of entries. But the first round, if you want to enter the contest, you have to be in by August 31st. The grand prize winner will receive $5,000, as well as a profile in Publishers Weekly. And I've mentioned Publishers Weekly a lot in the past. It's a huge trade industry magazine read by publishers and agents and bookstores and all sorts of people in the industry. So having a profile in that is really huge. Semi-finalists will receive a blurb for their book from a best-selling or award-winning author, as well as a mention in Publishers Weekly. And all entrants will receive a brief critical assessment of their novel written by a Publishers Weekly reviewer. To me, that's worth submitting just for that. So in the children's categories, we have middle grade and young adult. There is no picture book category in this particular contest. There are also several categories of adult books. So go to this URL you see on your screen to get details. There is a $99 entry fee. I just want to alert you to that. That does not mean it's a scam. It means that they are paying qualified judges to judge the entries, and they need to cover the cost because they're probably going to get a lot of entries. But as I said, if you're getting an assessment from a Publisher's Weekly reviewer of your project, even if you don't win, I mean, that's very valuable as a self-published author to get that kind of feedback. So if you don't want to write down this long URL, you can also just Google Book Life Prize, and you will get this particular page. Jane Friedman, who is an incredible industry expert who you should be following, she has 2 excellent articles on her blog right now. One is called Questions to Ask Your Publisher Before You Sign the Contract. And that was a blog post on June 8th. And it even covers things like asking your publisher about their marketing plan for your book. How are the salespeople going to pitch your book to bookstores? Things like that. Really good questions that a lot of people don't even know they can ask before they sign the contract. And also a great guest post called How I Hosted a Socially Distanced Book Event by Ed Sawisky. Sorry, Ed, I probably mispronounced your name. Oh, and I wrote Jane 17th. That's supposed to be June 17th. Sorry. So that was just a very recent post. But again, he went step by step through. He did a book event where it was live, but it was socially distanced because a lot of bookstores are starting to open up, and kind of how that worked. And I thought that was really great. Any of you who are thinking about getting back to doing book signings and that kind of thing, you might get some great tips there. So go to janefriedman.com and just click on blog, and all these articles will come up. Also in Publishers Weekly, they're starting a new School and Library Spotlight newsletter, which is going to be a monthly newsletter that you can get in your inbox, containing resources in both trade and educational publishing. Now, this is geared toward librarians and educators working with children, but I think I subscribe to it. I think anybody who has kids or who wants to write for kids should subscribe to it too, because it's going to feature new releases, themed book lists, author interviews, all kinds of things that are specifically geared to schools and librarians. And if you want to write for that market, this is going to be a great resource for you to see what's out there, what's kind of going on in the school and library market. And as Emma Dryden said last week on our Distancing Social, if you're serious about being an author, you need to know what's going on in the industry. So this is one of the ways you can do that. And so go to, I made a bit.ly link here, bit.ly/school and library, to shorten that so that you can find that easily. So a couple other links I'm going to give you here that are related to tonight's topic, and we will post these under the replay of this Distancing Social on our blog tomorrow on writeforkids.org blog. And so you can find these links there if you don't write them down tonight. A couple great sort of essays that have appeared recently in the Horn Book, which is another wonderful publication you should be aware of that deals with children's books, by 2 authors, Black authors. One is called Our Modern Minstrelsy by Kekla Magoon, and that was just in the May-June special issue Hornbook did called Breaking the Rules. And then Who Can Tell My Story by Jacqueline Woodson, who's an amazing author. And this actually originally appeared in 1998, but it's recently been republished in the Hornbook. And the thing is, it's still just as relevant now as it was 1998. And it's an interesting discussion of this topic that we are all starting to talk about. Who can tell other people's stories? And so these are some really interesting takes on that particular topic that I think are great for you guys to read and get another viewpoint and a little more background about this discussion that we are all having. So again, we will post those links with the replay. So now I am honored and very excited to introduce our guest, Patrice Williams-Marks. So Patrice, you can go ahead and turn on your camera. Hello. So Patrice is the author. Hi, Patrice. 14 books, over 10 screenplays and several short films. She works as a sensitivity reader and reviewer to not only authors, but gaming companies, marketing and advertising agencies, as well as publishers. And she is the course creator of sensitivityreviews.com, the only online course resource to learn how to sensitivity read, how to become a sensitivity reader. And she's got this awesome podcast, Author Uncut, where she gives you the unvarnished truth on writing as an independent author and transitioning from screenwriting to novelist while navigating the world of sensitivity reading. So, Patrice, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here tonight and to start this really important discussion that we're going to be having for many, many months to come, I'm sure. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can both be on here. You can see us.
Okay. Hello.
Hello. So welcome. So I wanted to start by asking you about your own writing. Tell us a little bit about what you write. You have quite a body of work in lots of different, areas. So tell us a little bit about who you are as a writer.
Well, as a screenwriter, I started writing screenplays during college and after college, and I focused mostly on historical dramas, stories that were also based in fact, but I fictionalized them. I'm just really fascinated by history, and I love doing research. I consider myself a master researcher. I also love to learn. And so whenever I come across a story of something fascinating that I've never heard before, I see how I can turn it into a screenplay or a book or, some other form of media. And so that's how I got started, was basically writing those types of stories as a screenplay writer. And then around 2011, I came across a blog put on by, he's now executive producer and creator of all the Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, Chicago, whatever, Chicago, there's so many Chicago shows. But he had a blog that encouraged screenwriters to actually start writing prose and to start writing different mediums. And he liked the pulp fiction type of writing. And so I decided that I would write a story just for his blog. And that was pretty fun. I decided to kind of put two genres together, where it was a sci-fi story with one of my favorite time periods, the 1930s, 1940s. So it was actually a futuristic story, but it felt like it was, during the gangster period, the 1940s. And so he actually picked that story to publish, and that helped me get my first manager. And the story actually almost it almost became a television series by this much, and then it fell apart. But that opened up my world to becoming a novelist. I turned that story into a short story, put it online, put it on Amazon, and it was so fun to be able to engage with your audience, and you feel like you're active and that you have control of your destiny, other than as a screenwriter, which I still love. But you basically write it, you give it to somebody, and then you may never hear anything again. Mm-hmm. You can't really control what happens with your screenplay, but you can get to meet your audience as an author. And so that was the first one that I did. And then every time I do something where I dig in deep, I do a lot of research, I turn that into a book. And so my second book was on crowdfunding. And that one was written in 2015. So that obviously is a nonfiction book. But I update it periodically, and it still does pretty well on Amazon and all the other websites. And I've kept it, I've kind of expanded it as a series. And so I do the fiction and nonfiction, and most of my fiction is historical pieces, like I said.
Mhm.
So that's my forte. That's kind of what I love to do. And I love to kind of get in deep and dirty with the research to where it feels like you're actually there. You feel like you're actually in that time period, not someone just supposing what it was like.
Right. Well, I imagine getting really into that research and really feeling like you're there has set you up well for being a sensitivity reader, because you have to have that same kind of eye for what you're reading in other people's work. So can you tell us what exactly does a sensitivity reader do?
Yes, well, sensitivity readers, you may think they're just all minority writers, but that's not true. It's a wide range of people. And it's any person that's part of a marginalized group that has their own vast personal experience that they want to share with other people. So you could be a minority, you could be a Muslim, you could be someone who stutters, or someone who has experience with mental illness, or someone who's obese or overweight. If you have a family member or yourself have experienced autism. So it's all these micro groups of people who live experiences and are willing to share it with others to make their material more authentic.
Okay. And you know, as you know, and as we've talked about, publishing is undergoing quite a long overdue sea change right now with regards to making room for underrepresented voices, from authors and illustrators and even people who work in the industry. There's quite a push to have more diversity in publishing staff as well. For those of us who are part of the majority culture who are listening right now, we're aware of this. We want to be supportive of this, but we're also really afraid of making a mistake right now. So how can sensitivity readers help people from the majority culture avoid missteps in their work?
Well, I think it could start by actually speaking with, if you have a character who's African American, Asian, has autism, that sort of thing. If you have someone in your atmosphere or your, you know, in your circle that fits that description, it's a great start to just talk with them and tell them what the type of character that you're creating and ask them for their advice. If you're writing about a character where you have no experience, you don't know anybody, then that's where a sensitivity reader can come in. And I wouldn't be afraid to make mistakes. I would just go for it, write what you have a passion for, and get it on paper. And then you can go back, because every book has several versions of editing process. I mean, mine goes through 5 or 6, type of thing, depending on the type of editor you hire. And that's basically what sensitivity readers are. They're considered diversity editors as well. And so I would say, write it, look over it, have somebody that's a friend of yours or an acquaintance of yours that fits the character that you're writing, to see if there's anything that may be, grossly incorrect or has stereotypes or misrepresentation, and consider making the changes. And if you don't have someone like that, hire a sensitivity reader, maybe 1 or 2. If you have a gay character, someone from the LGBTQ community, and then you have an African American character, or you have a Muslim character sort of thing, you may want to hire or find different sensitivity readers to read for those specific characters. So I wouldn't be afraid to write it, because you have a right to write whatever you want. But if you want to be fair, if you want to not misrepresent a person, then you'd want to seek out a sensitivity reader or a friend to review what you've written, if you have no experience with those people or the community as a whole.
Right. And that's a good point you just made, is that one sensitivity reader, it's not a one size fits all sensitivity reader. each reader specializes in certain areas. So you might
Right.
need 2 or 3 different sensitivity readers depending on the kind of character you're writing. Do you also
Yeah,
hire?
especially.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, would you also hire a sensitivity reader if you're setting your book in a different country, say? Do you want someone who has lived in that country for a long time to look over to make sure you have the details of setting correct and culture? Is that important as well?
I say it certainly wouldn't hurt. One of the jobs that I've had was a lady who wrote a book that was actually based in Jamaica, which I've never been to Jamaica, and it was based on a hotel and the people who worked in that hotel. And so she contacted me just to read I read the entire, novel or manuscript, but she was more concerned about the Black Jamaican characters, because she wasn't able to find any Jamaican sensitivity readers. But then she also had experience working in the islands in a hotel. So she already had that background, but I'm sure that she would have probably sought out somebody, to cover those bases if she didn't have that knowledge herself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is it usually the author's responsibility to hire a sensitivity reader before they submit their manuscript to a publisher, or do publishers sometimes hire the readers as well once they acquire a manuscript?
Oh, it's not one size fits all. With indie authors, I usually get the manuscript when it's pretty close to being published, the final phases of it. With publishers, I get it before then, after it's come, straight off the presses, and then they send it to me before they go through the final phases of the editing process. So it just depends on where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And I prefer projects that are close to completion as opposed to still in development, because they can change so much, after you've done your analysis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I had another question and it just went out of my head. So it'll come back to me. Excuse me. Oh, I was going to ask you, what are your particular specialties as a sensitivity reader?
Well, I obviously have a background as an African-American female. I'm also a foster mother to infants. So I have that background with, working with the county and the foster care system. I also have experience with interracial relationships. And I have a whole list of things that on my website of what my experience is that people seek me for. But mostly I've done my writing for people who have, African-American characters or the foster care system. Those are the two biggest ones that, I sensitivity read for.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting, because it would have never occurred to me that I would have, if I was writing about a foster care kid, I would have done my research, with foster care and maybe talk to parents who have fostered kids, that kind of thing. But I wouldn't have thought, oh, I should get a sensitivity reader for this particular issue as well. So I think that really, we need to really open our mind into all the areas where we might not have direct experience, and these sensitivity readers can really help us make our book more authentic. So,
yes, I really enjoy doing these sensitivity reads, and they're not just reports to, put a downer on things or to make a writer feel bad. I'm a writer, and I definitely am sensitive to those issues. So what I do with sensitivity reads, I first read over the manuscript and I take small little notes on the actual manuscript. And then what I do is I go back and then I expound on those short notes, and I provide links for research, because I love research, videos, whatever they need. And so when I come across a situation that needs to be addressed, I'll say, you may not have considered this, but in my experience, and then I tell them, and then I say, you may want to consider changing this, and here are some options. And so that's how I handle every correction. And then if I find things that are wonderful, I praise them for that too. And I try to find actually more things that are wonderful than need tweaking.
Mm-hmm.
And so my reports are from 10 to 20 pages, that sort of thing. I'm very thorough so they know that I really took the time to understand their material, and that I'm giving them, I'm not just saying you should change this. It's like, here's some suggestions, here's some options, here's some research, this is what you can read further. And then it's all up to them afterwards to make changes if they want, or not, keep it as is.
Right. Do illustrators need a sensitivity reader to just look over their illustrations, make sure they are culturally accurate?
I think so. There have been, quite a few children's books that flew under the radar until they were released, and then there was a firestorm.
Mm-hmm.
There won the, George Washington's birthday type of thing, where the slaves were all happy to bake this person's birthday cake, this president's birthday cake. And in actuality, that was based on a real slave. And he wasn't happy to be baking for George Washington. And in fact, he tried to escape 3 or 4 times. And the 4th time, he was only able to escape by leaving his daughter behind. And that's heart-wrenching. And then they have a picture of the daughter all happy and smiles on the cover, So yes, it's definitely something to consider. And if you look at what's happened recently with some of these food companies deciding, okay, some of our products, may have, racist caricatures of people. I guess we're going to change them, like Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben, and whoever that is on Cream of Wheat, type of thing. They, those all come from caricatures from the time of slavery, and it's perpetuating. And some of these ads, if you look at them, it's written in broken English to make the person seem illiterate and, beneath you, but she loves making pancakes type of thing. And if they had a sensitivity reader during that time, it wouldn't have passed the mustard.
Right. And it's taken a long time for people to realize that, which is unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, is there a difference between an author writing a story from the perspective of a character who is outside of that author's experience? So the point of view narrator is someone who is different from the author's actual life experience, or an author who simply wants to populate their book with a diverse cast, but their main point of view character is, like, if I'm white, is a white character. Does that make sense, that question? In your opinion, is there a difference as far as the difficulty in writing that kind of book, the kinds of things you would look at as a sensitivity reader between those two types of books?
Not necessarily. If they both are speaking, I mean, one probably would be easier to go through, the one that's just a narrator, because you're not dealing with a physical character, and seeing if they have stereotypes with the way they speak, where they live, who their friends are, who they are as people, as opposed to someone who's just speaking as a narrator. The only thing you would have to work with is perhaps the dialogue that they're speaking. So it is 2 different things, and one would be, easier than the other.
Mm-hmm. Are there sort of typical mistakes you see a lot from writers when you're sensitivity reading?
Yes, some ones that are kind of strange too. I don't know where it came from, but there are, and this has come time, this isn't just 1, 2, 3, 4 times. I've read this over and over again, where they'll have a older minority character that's a senior, and each time they're hunched over, decrepit, and they've got something wrong with their hand, where it's I don't know, frozen in a claw or something. And I've read, and I thought, that first time I read that, I said, that's unusual. And I pointed it out to the first author who used it. And I said, is there any reason why you describe the person like that? Is there a backstory we'd love to know about, type of thing? But then I saw it over and over again. So that was unusual.
Huh.
Other things are perhaps you writing dialogue to where you think, somebody Black speaks, or if you have an Asian character and you have them speaking in broken English, that sort of thing. So I've come across that. I've also come across where authors, they take shortcuts in describing their minority characters. The white characters are fully fleshed out and their backstory. And the Black characters or minority characters, they only describe their skin color, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's frustrating, and that's something that I always mention to the person, saying, I'd like to know more about this person. Make them as a full character as the other ones are. There's no need to describe their skin color. We'll figure out who they are, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what other ones do I come across? Perhaps if they're Black characters, a lot of times they're always automatically from the ghetto, and they have no father, and there's drugs, and there's this and that, and not all Black people live that way, and not all poor people live that way. So I try to say, if you have a character like that, why don't you try to base them on somebody you actually know, or a real person, so it becomes more authentic, and then try to vary who the other characters are, so they're not all carbon copies of same, character that's down and out, and cusses and is poor and uneducated, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Great. So clearly there's a lot of stereotyping going on that we need to get beyond, and that's another great reason for a sensitivity reader. So I'm going to get to a few questions here.
Okay.
Latina asks, would you need to hire a sensitivity reader to read the entire book, or just an excerpt of where you might have a question about a particular area of the story? And would the cost be based on that? So do sensitivity readers charge by the hour, by the page? Does it depend on the project? And if you just want them to look at a small portion of your book, is that possible?
Well, you may be able to find a sensitivity reader that'll just read a small section, but one that's been doing it a while won't do that, because it gives you a small, window into the whole picture. You have to read the entire manuscript to understand how that fits into the storyline. And so I personally wouldn't accept just reading a small section, because you may actually give them incorrect information that won't fit with the entire story, because you've just seen this small little piece of it. So, and as far as payment is concerned, it depends on the type of sensitivity reader you find. The people that have gone through my courses, I encourage them to start out with first doing free sensitivity reads, and so that they can get used to the process. And so you might be able to find, on Goodreads, Facebook, where have you, find people that do it for free because they're learning. And then there's those that have been doing it for a year or two, something like that. And their average prices, like it's usually per manuscripts, and sometimes they do it per word. But the average for someone who's just starting out is like $250, $350. And then if you get someone who's more experienced and will give you full reports and spend more time with you, then that can be much more expensive, 500 and up, depending on how long.
Right, and you're talking about a novel here.
Yeah.
If we have like a children's book, a much shorter picture book, it would be less.
Yes.
And
for sure.
I had a question come in by email previous to this from Raymond, who wonders how he could learn to become a sensitivity reader. I know that you train sensitivity readers on your site. Would that be the best place for him to go to learn how to become a sensitivity reader?
Oh, yes. I actually have the more advanced courses, you have to pay for them, and they are, by the way, closed right now. I only open them up like once a year, and they're closed right now. But I do have a free open email course if you go to the website, and it's a 7-day email course, and it takes you through the whole process of, the type of person you need to be a sensitivity reader. This is what you can expect. And there's little, workbook assignments after each day that it take you 15 minutes, 20 minutes to do. But by the end of the week, you'll figure out if it's something you're qualified for, if you have specific niches that you think you'd be great as a sensitivity reader for, if it's something that, will fit your lifestyle. And basically, some of the requirements of being a sensitivity reader, you should be business minded because it is a business. You should be very professional when you're dealing with your clients. So you should know how to keep deadlines, respond quickly to people, that sort of thing. You know that you should be there as a partner to the writer and author, not just as an instructor or someone to critique, because you want to be there, you want to work with them to make their material as good as it can be. So if you're approaching it from that aspect, and that's something that you love to read, by the way, as well. So if you have those type of qualities, then you're on your way to, becoming a sensitivity reader.
Great. And tell us your website that people should go to learn how to be a sensitivity reader.
Okay. It's sensitivityreviews.com. And there's a button right in the first page that says, let me see what it says. It says, click here, And then it'll take you to the 3 different courses. And the very first course is the one that's open now, that's free. That's the 7-day email course. And then you'll be added to an email list. And then after you go through it, if it's something that you're interested in, you'll be emailed when the full course is open. Then you can decide if, if it's something you want to pursue. And so the course is very extensive. There's videos and workbooks, and it's a lot there because it's a lot of work. But if you're serious, you don't want to have questions. Well, what do I do next? Or am I really, is this really for me? All of that is answered in the full course. And I even have sample contracts because that's something you should have before you take on any sensitivity read, even if you're doing it for free. There should be a contract. Absolutely. So, it's basically everything you need in order to get started.
Right. And what sensitivity readers are not there for, I'm assuming, is to tell you if there's a plot hole in your story, or if the ending isn't satisfying, that kind of thing. You are there to look at those details of race, religion, gender identity, the kinds of things that you might be reading for being a foster parent, not looking at the overall story structure. Am I correct?
Right. We're not developmental editors, so we don't do that. However, sometimes if I see a glaring hole where a character mentions they're going to do something and it's really important to the plot, and then you get to the end and you're like, what happened to that? I do mention stuff like that if it's glaring, but normally sensitivity readers don't. But if it's something glaring, and I've had them saying, oh yeah, thanks so much, I didn't even think of that, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So then I do add those little mentions, but most sensitivity readers don't.
I have a couple of questions from our Facebook viewers. Melva is writing about the Navajo culture. She'll be looking for a Navajo sensitivity reader, but in general, how can people find the right sensitivity reader for their work?
That's true. I actually have a database on my website, and I know there's other databases as well. You might want to Google sensitivity reader database and you'll find some. In fact, let me see, I just came across one yesterday. It's from the Association of Canadian Publishers.
Oh, great.
So, their website is publishers.ca, and they actually have a database of sensitivity readers, about 6 or 7 of them, maybe 8. I see there's a lot of LGBTQ ones here, but there's other varieties. So that's one. I have one on my website as well, where people can find sensitivity readers. So people who have gone through the course and I've read one of their sample sensitivity reads and I feel that they're ready, then I add them to the database. And then people who have been doing it for years, they've been added to the database as well, so it's not just people who've come through the course.
We'll add that. We'll add that to the, to the replay. One more question from Facebook. Sheila asks if publishers are starting to actually hire sensitivity readers, or is it still, for people who are trying to get traditionally published, is it still the author's responsibility to hire?
Yeah, we had covered that earlier, but you can expand on that.
Yeah. Yes, I get both. For me personally, half and half. I've worked with small publishing houses from Canada to one of the big 3 publishing houses on a book that they had to pull, that was actually released, and they had to pull because of the fury over it. And so I did a sensitivity read for that. But I normally don't get authors that are from the big publishing houses. They normally don't contact me. It's usually the publishing houses. But when I deal with authors directly, it's usually indie authors. And then I also work with people who have written gaming scripts, where they contact me directly.
That's interesting with the gaming. I'm glad that they're doing that as well. So we have a question here. How do you discern between the sorts of details that might need to be changed for the sake of sensitivity versus potentially offensive or inauthentic material that may be part of the characterization of a character? So you talked a little bit about stereotypes. When you're reading, do you flag things and say, this, I suggest these changes for sake of authenticity? Do you flag things that are just flat out offensive and suggest that they take them out of the book?
There are instances where they're flat out offensive, and it's surprising because usually when an author comes to you, they really are looking for answers and to make sure that nothing's offensive. So you're not getting people who are racist, coming to you because they don't care. It's those who care. So that's how I take it. So I have had some that have written extremely offensive characters. And, I've had to take a breath a few times before writing, pointing out why this character is offensive to me, and why did they feel that they had to write him in such a way. And I know, perhaps they have a backstory that wasn't included in the book, and that's why it's also important to read the entire manuscript to see how they fit. And so there's sometimes a back and forth, but I definitely let them know, I don't sugarcoat it when I see something that's extremely racist, and I'll say, this is offensive and this is why it's offensive. And here's my suggestion, to address it, type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Great. Someone asked, your course for sensitivity readers, you said it's closed now. When will you be opening it up again?
Well, I still have people, it's self-paced, and I still have a few stragglers that haven't finished it from the last time it was open. So it almost kind of depends on them, because I'd like to have them fully completed before I start another phase. So it's probably going to be another couple of months before it's open again. But if you, if you email me or take the free course, you're on the email list, and, you'll be notified when it's open for sure. And and it's usually like a week window that it's open, but you'll be notified in plenty of time prior to that week.
Great. Carol says, wondering about bringing awareness to areas that are misrepresented frequently because the bias is still considered acceptable. And this kind of goes, you said sometimes people write things that are offensive to you, but clearly they're coming to you because they want to know if it's offensive.
Yeah.
Do you see areas that just people don't know that it's bias when they're writing it because it's considered acceptable still?
I think that's true with most material.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I seek a sensitivity reader. And I'm guilty of that too. Before it was even called sensitivity reading, I dug up a story. Actually, my brother-in-law found a little article in a magazine about a woman who lived in the 1800s who was a Hungarian aristocrat, and her family was slaughtered during the Hungarian Revolution, and she was the only sole survivor. She was sold into slavery through these Turkish slave traders, and then her freedom was eventually bought by a British explorer. And so I actually, for this research for that screenplay, I actually went to join the Royal Geographical Society in London so that I could read the actual manuscripts from both her and her husband during that time, the explorer. And it was so fascinating to see their handwriting, and read their handwritten manuscripts. And then I took a train to Salisbury, England, and met with the descendants of Florence Baker, that's her name. And they let me read some of her personal diaries, and I just learned so much from them. And so after I promised that I'd let them read the screenplay after I wrote it. And so it took me like 4 months to write it after that. And I sent it to them. And I actually made some glaring mistakes that I thought I had done all my research and I thought I had everything, to a T. And there was a few things that they said, well, Florence wouldn't have reacted that way. She's not that type of person. And there were some other circumstances too. This has been over 10 years, so I can't remember the specifics, but I got that screenplay back and I actually made the changes. It was up to me to decide if I wanted to make the changes, but I decided to make the changes. They knew what they were talking about, and I wanted to represent her accurately. And so it happens, to the best of us.
Sure. But it also shows how we all have blind spots.
Yes.
Even
exactly.
unintentional blind spots. And it's just so important to get that other set of eyes on your work.
Yeah. Yes, just like you might see an ad for Dove where they, have a beautiful Black woman, and they'll have a caption, about skincare or something. And one set of people look at it one way, and one will look at it the other way. And to Black people, this was an actual ad. It was offensive because the wording made it seem like she wanted to lighten her skin, and she wasn't happy in the skin she was in, type of thing. But anybody else who just thought it was, that's a nice ad,
Yeah. That's eye-opening. Well, I know you have another interview to get to. Let me just make sure I've hit all the big questions here. I think, here's actually a really good question to wrap up here. What about a character in a novel who is written to be deliberately offensive for the sake of the story? Now, there's different kinds of offensive. I mean, the character can be deliberately acting in an offensive way because he or she is a jerk, in the story, versus the author portraying the character in an offensive way because of who they are. So can you give a little bit of differentiation there as to what might be acceptable? What might be the difference between those two?
Well, I think it depends on the piece, actually. I couldn't speak broadly, but if they wanted to, there are screenplays out there and movies with, Black gangsters and, with the gun in their holster and, cussing up a storm and dealing drugs and stuff like that. And it might be based on a real person. So you don't want to sanitize that. But I think it's good to balance, if you have characters like that, that are important to the story and maybe even based on a real person, then you balance it with other characters who are the opposite of that, so that you just don't have a whole row of people that all have the same nasty characteristics and they all happen to be the same race, How I would look at it.
Right. And I think a lot of times it's, as an author, are you making a deliberate choice to write a character this way for a purpose that is serving the plot in some way, or are you doing it unconsciously? And I think that that's a big difference there.
Yes. True.
Okay, well, like I said, I know you need to get going. Is there anything else you want to tell us? I'm going to give you the last word here about anything you do or writing in general, or sort of how we can move forward and be respectful in our writing.
Sure. I would say don't censor yourself from the start. Just write what you love and what you're passionate about, and then address any issues in the editing. You can also write about, there's no need to not ever write about a character that you've never met. Don't be afraid to put a Black character or Native American character or Hispanic character into your story because you don't know anyone like that. I would first just start out writing them just as a person with no idiosyncrasies according to their race, and go from there, and then started adding and layering as you go through the editing process. And you'll eventually get to where you want to be. Great.
And as you said, research is so important, and then hiring a sensitivity reader. Make sure you get it right. Okay.
Yeah, friend. If you have a Black friend, Asian friend, someone who experienced mental illness, if that's a character in your story, go to them first because you trust them and say, I want you to be honest with me. Is anything here offensive? Is this accurate? That sort of thing. And, start that way so that you don't have to pay and you'll get used to feedback. And then if you don't have a circle of friends or people or coworker or somebody like that, then that's when you would start seeking out a sensitivity reader with specific niche, that goes along with your characters.
Great. Well, you've given us such great advice tonight and so much to think about, and we really appreciate your time here. So thank you so much for being here. And with the replay tomorrow, when it's up on our blog, we'll post all of Patrice's links. You can see all of her books on her website. A lot of people were asking, you know, the names of your different books. You have so many. So I just want to say we'll direct them to your website and your sensitivity reading course, and listen to her podcast. It's fascinating as well. So
yeah, I'm actually reading chapter by chapter of a suspense thriller. It's a revenge suspense thriller. And I'm reading chapter by chapter each week. So it's basically a free audiobook.
Great.
And so I'm down to my last 2 chapters. So you can always start at the beginning if you want.
Got to catch up so we don't,
Yeah.
we don't have spoilers.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, again, thank you so much, Patrice.
Thanks, Patrice.
This was great.
Okay, thank you. It's wonderful. I enjoyed myself.
Good.
And thank you for doing what you guys do too. It is so important. And the information that you share with people is invaluable. So thank you.
Well, thank you. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And we will see you next week on another Distancing Social.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.